Hello and welcome to Power Talk. I'm Shireen Bhan. Today we're joined by a very special guest. Shantanu Narayan currently heads the operations at Adobe. Now, he has successfully turned the company around. He's been charting out a growth path for Adobe, which is delivering significant returns. As always, Shantanu, it's a pleasure to have you join us here on CNBC-TV18. If I could start by asking you about the impact of the tax cuts that have been announced by the Trump administration. I understand that it would bring down your effective tax rate quite considerably. What will that mean starting the next financial year in terms of Adobe?
Shireen, it's always wonderful to be on your show. We actually did announce that as a result of the reduced corporate tax that our earnings would grow quite substantially in 2018 and then continue to have a lower tax rate. I think will just continue to improve American competitiveness. The other thing we also announced was that we would be bringing back the money that we had offshore, and that would again allow us to invest in innovation and continued growth for Adobe.
You know, you're talking about investing in innovation. What do you do with all the cash that you're sitting on, Shantanu, in excess of $5 billion? What's the plan in terms of more acquisitions, in terms of the capabilities that you believe you would like to acquire at this point?
The company, Shireen, is focused primarily on long-term growth, and access to capital was something that Adobe had even prior to this repatriation. We've had a long history of stock buybacks as a way of continuing to return excess capital to shareholders, and I think investing in technologies like AI and mobile that we think will continue to drive future growth is also top of mind in terms of our agenda.
You know, since you're talking about driving future growth, Shantanu, let's talk about specific markets. The US is seeing some pretty strong momentum at this point in time. You're seeing across your verticals strong growth as well. What could be the areas of concern, if any? What could be the downside risk to the kind of growth potential that we are currently seeing?
Well, first, I think we're in rarefied atmosphere in that when you look at a company like Adobe and what we are seeing on top-line growth, what we are seeing with respect to bottom-line growth at a very substantial margin, I think, we're a very unique position. I think in terms of, potential concerns that might exist, we look at the two key imperatives for the company, namely empowering people to create and helping businesses transform, and think that they represent tailwinds for many years because that innate desire for whether you're an individual user or whether you're an enterprise to tell your story digitally, and the need for companies to determine whether digital is going to be a tailwind or headwind, we don't think is impacted by the economy. So we'll continue to monitor the economy, but we think that both of the businesses that we have are so fundamental to how individuals and businesses transform that as long as we continue to innovate, we'll see good growth.
Okay, since you're talking about good growth, let me then ask you about the India story, Shantanu. In terms of hiring, in terms of where you see the next drivers for growth coming in, specifically from the India market, you were here last inaugurating your new headquarters in Noida. That's when we last met. Take me through what the picture now looks like when it comes to India.
I think every time I come to India, Shireen, it seems like we're at full capacity, and I know we have this conversation always about, is Adobe giving numbers, but the net is that, if you've seen the incredible success that we've had, that has actually translated into headcount growth in the company, and again, disproportionate headcount growth in India. We have approximately a third of our global employees right now, and the new facility in Noida as well as the new one in Bangalore, I understand, are already at capacity. So I think, we continue to be incredibly excited about the talent that's available here. We've also started up a small AI lab here in Hyderabad because there's incredible talent and skills. And so for us, it's always been about quality and this new generation of millennials who have these incredible skills, but we will continue to grow in India. I think another area of growth for India has really been on the digital marketing side, what we've been doing with consulting services as well as what we call customer success managers. So even the field organization has actually seen a significant amount of growth here in India.
Let me continue with that line of questioning then, Shantanu. I've often asked this question of you. Let me try my luck once again. Since you continue to grow in India and the growth has largely been organic, are there any opportunities that look exciting at this point in time that you may want to consider from an inorganic perspective?
Like last time, Shireen, we would love to find technology companies that are innovating. I think as the evolution of the industry in India continues, services is still where there's a tremendous opportunity in terms of talent, but the product innovation in a fundamental way in the areas that are critical for us, namely digital media and digital marketing, there are none, unfortunately, that are on my radar. So if you have some interesting companies, we certainly have the appetite and the capital in order to do it. But unfortunately, we still haven't seen any that really bubble to the top in terms of ones that we would like to put top of our list.
But is
Here
it just
in India, that is.
Is it just a valuation issue, Shantanu?
With respect to the entrepreneurship that we are seeing, I think the entrepreneurship in India is not in the areas that are critical to Adobe's growth, namely analytics, what we are doing with AI, what we are doing around augmented reality and virtual reality. To your question, though, in the US, sometimes valuations have got ahead of themselves. But if it's the right technology and the right people, we will still continue to be aggressive about looking at it. We bought some really interesting companies last year that are going to be the basis of some new products that we deliver this year. And so we're constantly looking, but even the organic opportunity at Adobe is so large right now. As long as we continue to deliver against that innovation, we feel very confident about where Adobe is headed.
Okay, Shantanu, you spoke about the artificial intelligence lab that Adobe is setting up here in India. And one of the questions that industry as well as the government is grappling with is what is going to happen a few years down the line? NASSCOM put out a report suggesting that almost 20 to 25% of the current jobs in the IT and the BPO space could be redundant over the next 12 to 18 months. So what do you believe is the need of the hour, and how concerned should we be on account of the impact of AI on jobs?
Well, AI is certainly going to eliminate a lot of the repetitive tasks that happen. And so I think the imperative that the Modi government, as well as here what I hear from the Minister for IT, who's so progressive, Rama Rao, is all about reskilling employees. India stepped up when there was the need for services. The need now is for fundamental product innovation. And I think when you think about AI, it's really about how do you take all of the data that people are collecting and use models to make sense of that data. So new areas like data science, like analytics, like the ability to harness the power of data, those are going to be critical. And I think it's imperative that our educational institutions focus a lot more on these new skills. Innovation and evolution are just a natural form of what happens in societies. And I think it's, imperative that we stay ahead of it.
Well, Shantanu, let me ask you then, what are you most excited about in 2018? From a strategy perspective, things are falling into place for you. They've been delivering returns. But today, what are you most excited about?
Well, I think, this area that we call the experience wave, which is if the first generation of enterprise software was automating the back office, ERP, and the second generation was automating the front office with productivity, helping all of the leaders in industry and government deal with what we are calling the experience wave, which is how do you step up to meet customer and consumer expectations, is I think going to be an area of explosive growth for us. On digital media, I look at augmented reality and I look like technologies like voice and the ability for people to speak more to computers and for it to infer based on prior history through AI what you can do. Those are perhaps two areas that, from Adobe, I continue to be excited about. More generally, I just believe that the ability for healthcare to be transformed through the use of technology and pattern recognition is an area that I think will help all societies in a meaningful way.
Okay, Shantanu, I'll end then by asking you, through 2017, the concerns surrounding the uncertainty about possible changes with visas in the US weighed down tech companies. Specifically, of course, the sentiment here in India was under pressure on account of that. But do you believe that that threat has diminished somewhat today?
My continued belief is that, companies like Adobe focus on ensuring that we're a global company, whether it's where we recruit our talent, whether it's where we sell our services. And I'm actually confident that all governments, including the US and including India, will continue to recognize that for competitiveness in the global economy, that you need to ensure that US-based companies, if you're in the US, have access to global talent and global markets. And so I'm confident that it'll work itself out. But as you know, I'm an optimist, and I continue to focus on how we can drive growth for Adobe.
Well, you are an optimist, and it's working for you, Shantanu. Always a pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC TV18. Shantanu Narayan there, taking us through Adobe's action plan for 2018. We are going to take a break, but when we return, my exclusive chat with the executive chairman of Honeywell, the industrial giant, that's coming up after the break.